introduce Dr. Beth Cabrera, but before doing so, I'd like to thank Dr. Angie Hattery and the faculty and staff of Women and Gender Studies for partnering with our center for making this event possible this afternoon. Dr. Hattery, along with her colleagues, are making a difference, helping us realize the goal of achieving a tipping point for women, which I truly hope we realize in our lifetime. The Center for the Advancement of Wellbeing serves as a catalyst for well-being with the vision of impacting 10 million people by the year 2019. And I thank you all for joining us. You're now an official part of the count. That was supposed to be funny. Dr. Beth Cabrera is not your average academic or scholar. She's more than that. And she's more than First Lady at Mason. Dr. Cabrera is first and foremost a scholar. She's a boundary crosser and a thought leader. Her new book, Beyond Happy, Women, Work, and Wellbeing, is one of the first to make the connections between well-being and women using a holistic approach. The books on women in the workplace that preceded Beyond Happy, while valuable, often fall short of making the claim about the importance of women living and leading with meaning. A real contribution Dr. Cabrera's book makes is fully acknowledging the challenges and inequities women currently face while proposing evidence-based well-being practices such as self-compassion and a strengths orientation that promote human flourishing and lead to experiencing a life well lived. While her book was just released last month, it already is receiving so many accolades and positive reviews. One reviewer noted, Beth's book is without a doubt a great guide for anyone who feels the need to regain sight on the contemporary meaning of happiness. Before I share some of her formal credentials with you, I'd like to make a few personal observations about Beth. As a positive organizational scholar, she walks the talk about living her values and enacting this work fully in her own life. She is one of the most generous scholars I know, always willing to contribute her knowledge to student groups, our university community, and beyond, while acknowledging and valuing the contributions of others. She gives selfishly while unswervingly committed to her own well-being practices. Some things you might not know about Beth is that she's an exceptionally talented karaoke singer and apparently a ruthless Monopoly game player. And I'm still waiting, Beth, for that Monopoly challenge invitation. She enjoys traveling around the world, spending time with her family and friends, and saying yes to as many lunch dates as she can possibly accommodate with her busy schedule. Dr. Beth Cabrera is a senior scholar at Mason Center for the Advancement of Wellbeing and an important contributor and collaborator of our Wellbeing University initiative. She also is a faculty affiliate with Mason's Institute for Leadership Excellence and a member of Mason's Strengths Academy Advisory Committee. Our Center for the Advancement of Wellbeing has grown and has been strengthened by her many contributions since she joined our community in 2012. And prior to her arrival at Mason, Beth held academic appointments at Arizona State University and Thunderbird School of Global Management. She received her doctorate degree from the Georgia Institute of Technology in Organizational Psychology. Please join me in congratulating Dr. Cabrera on her new book, Beyond Happy, Women, Work, and Wellbeing.
Thank you, Nance, for that wonderful introduction. So my interest in studying women's careers started when I almost quit my own career. My husband, Anjo, and I had lived in Madrid, Spain for about 10 years. And during that time, our two children, Alex and Emily, were born. and I earned tenure as a management professor at Carlsbad Federal University. Now, it hadn't been easy to teach in Spanish and all the publishing I needed to do to try to get tenure and managing the babies at home. But I do think it was easier than it would have been had I lived in the States. So I had, for each of our, when each of our children was born, I had a 4-month full paid maternity leave. And I have to say that after 4 months, I was really ready to go back to work. I remember going into my office and shutting the door and sitting down in front of my desk. I did not turn the computer on. And I don't know how long I sat there just listening to the silence. So it was also easy because in Spain, childcare is affordable and it's dependable, so I felt comfortable going back to work. Our children were 7 and 5 when we moved to Arizona for Angel's next job. They're not quite as cute now, but anyway, we were in a new place. We had no friends, we had no family, we had no support. And I knew what it would take to start over again and try to get tenure in another university. I also knew that the kids were going to start needing help with their homework. They were going to want to have play dates. They were going to participate in after-school activities. And I wanted to be there for them. So I seriously considered just not looking for work. But boy, did that make me sad. I loved being a professor. I couldn't imagine not teaching. So I got a part-time position at Arizona State University. And it was perfect. It let me continue to do what I love to do and to be there for the kids. So that's what got me interested then in studying women's careers. You know, I realized from my own experience how very challenging it can be for a working woman. And I started doing my first study at Thunderbird. So I studied women graduates of an international school of business and asked them about their careers. 47% of them told me that they had quit their jobs at some point in time. And at first that shocked me. But then I started thinking, you know, it's really not that surprising, is it? I mean, work is becoming more demanding every day. There's little to no flexibility. We have little to no support. And thanks to our cell phones, our smartphones, we're expected to be available 24 hours a day. And that's not all. For working women, in addition to all of our responsibilities at work, most of us are still responsible for the housework and the child care. So it's not surprising that we're all desperately seeking balance. When we think that's going to be the answer, right? If we can just find balance. The problem is balance is an impossible goal. I mean, think about your life. Have you achieved perfect balance? For more than a day or two. Okay? I mean, where there's absolutely no conflict between all the all the demands for your time, right? Trying to achieve this elusive goal of balance is actually causing more problems. It's just one more thing that we can't seem to do. And failing to achieve balance is further increasing our stress and undermining our self-confidence. You're going to walk out of here today with a better goal, a smarter goal, a more achievable goal. And that goal is well-being. I'm here today to encourage all of you to forget balance and to focus on well-being. Patsy Fox, like so many of us, was searching for balance. She and her husband are from the States, but at the time they were living in London, and she was in charge of European business development for DreamWorks. Their 2 sons were born while she worked for them, so she and her husband, after the second son, she also actually had maternity leaves like I did, so she had 3 months off for each one, and things were going fine, until their second son was born with Down syndrome. And that caused her husband and Patsy to rethink things, kind of reevaluate their priorities, and they decided to quit their jobs and move back to the States. Her husband got a job right away, and Patsy decided to stay home with the kids. Did she find balance? Well, maybe she was closer to having balance. She definitely was less stressed because she had fewer things that she was struggling to manage at the same time. But she wasn't beyond happy. She wasn't thriving. And that's because our well-being depends on two key factors. One is feeling good. And feeling good is about experiencing positive emotions throughout the day. It's being happy. But there's a second, equally important dimension to our well-being, and that's doing good. We sense that we're doing good, that our lives matter, when we're using our strengths and living our values to make a difference in the lives of others. We sense that our lives are meaningful. Now, when you're both doing good and feeling good, that's when you're thriving. In life, if you don't have either of these things, if you don't really feel happy, if you don't feel like your life is meaningful, well, then you're languishing. So back to Patsy. Raising her children was extremely meaningful to Patsy. In fact, when I interviewed her, she and her husband were getting ready to fly to China to bring home a baby girl who they were adopting. But she really missed the contributions that she had made to work. And she also missed the financial contributions that she had been making to her family. So Patsy decided to go back to work. She went back to work for a small entertainment company called Anchor Bay Entertainment. Now, it was no DreamWorks. In fact, she told me, she said, I went from promoting movies like Saving Private Ryan and Shrek all over Europe to selling Thomas the Train videos throughout the Midwest. But she was beyond happy. She was able to work from home office, which let her have lunch with her children, and she was able to be there to meet the therapists who came to work with her son. And she was also able to use her skills and her experience to contribute to an industry that she loved. Did Patsy have balance? No. I mean, she was still working long hours. She was still traveling around the Midwest. She wasn't able to do it all, but she was thriving. Forget balance and focus on well-being. Why is well-being a better goal? Well, it turns out that when you have high well-being, when you're thriving, that gives you psychological resources that help you manage everything better. The struggles don't go away, but you're better able to handle them. What does feeling good give us? Well, experiencing positive emotions energizes you. It's the opposite of when you're depressed, right? And when you're depressed, sometimes you just don't feel like you have the energy to get out of bed or to leave the house. It's the opposite when you feel good. When you have these positive emotions, you feel like, hey, I can do this. I have the energy to do this. Experiencing positive emotions will give you several other benefits as well. It increases your self-confidence. So again, things aren't necessarily easy. You have a lot of challenges, but you feel like you can do this. I got this. I can do this. Another thing experiencing positive emotions does for us is it helps us to be more creative. And this is really useful because you can figure out how to be in two places at the same time. All right, maybe not so, but it does help you with the logistics. And all the working moms out there know that one of the things that stresses us out the very most is figuring out all the complicated logistics, right? And a final thing experiencing positive emotions gives us is it increases our resilience. So again, you're still going to have bad days, but you're going to be better able to cope, and you're going to bounce back a lot quicker. So what does doing good give you? Well, if you sense that what you're doing in life matters, that it's meaningful because you're really making a positive difference in the lives of others, well, in that case, those daily hassles just don't bother you as much. If you keep the good that you're doing in mind, it puts other things into perspective. So your life isn't perfectly balanced, but that's okay because what you're doing is important. There's a second reason to pursue well-being. And that's because, unlike balance, well-being is actually an achievable goal. It isn't that hard to increase your well-being. There are many things that you can do to increase your positive emotions throughout the day. Try being mindful, focusing on what's going on right here, right now. And this can keep you from ruminating about the past or worrying about the future, which often bring negative emotions to an otherwise pleasant moment. Be grateful. Notice and appreciate all that's good in your life. Our natural tendency is actually to be focusing on problems and potential threats, right? But it turns out that if you intentionally direct your focus to things that are good, that can actually help change the pathways in your brain, rewire your brain, so that it becomes more natural to notice what's good in the world. It's also important to have hope for the future. Hopeful people set goals, they believe in their abilities to achieve those goals, and they're also really good about finding new ways to make progress when they face setbacks. What about doing good? There are a number of things you can do to increase your sense of meaning in life. One is to live your values. And that really means just spending your time doing what's most important. A lot of us get out of bed every morning and just start reacting, just trying to get through the day, one thing after another, right? And sometimes when we do that at the end of the week or the end of the month, we look back over the last month and think, gosh, we really haven't been doing those important things that we wanted to do. So it's about scheduling it on your calendar. And whether it's doing something to improve your health, or spending more time with friends and family, or that really meaningful project at work that you keep trying to get around to doing, put that on your calendar and make sure you're spending your time doing what matters most. Developing your strengths is another way to increase your sense of meaning. Finding opportunities every day to do what you do best makes you more successful, but it also gives you a sense that you're realizing your potential. And above all, do good by making positive differences in the lives of others. Think about the impact that you have at work, on your colleagues, or on your clients. And find new ways to make a positive difference in the lives of people at work, people at home, or people in the community. So let me end by telling you about Cynthia Stafford. Cynthia was a single mom working in a very low-paying office job. She was raising her 5 nieces and nephews, whom she had adopted when her brother was killed in a car crash, drunk car crash. So they were actually living paycheck to paycheck. Until one day, Cynthia won a $112 million jackpot in the California lottery. She became rich and famous overnight. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have heard stories about people's lives being ruined after winning a major lottery, right? Not Cynthia. And that's because she did a number of things that directly impacted her well-being. The first thing she did was to make sure that her children were financially stable and that everything was okay. So she created educational trust funds for all 5 of her nieces and nephews. Now that was a really smart move, because it turns out that the most important factor for our well-being are our relationships. And that's because our relationships affect both dimensions, feeling good and doing good. Spending time with people you like increases your positive emotions. I bet all of you could have told me that, right? But it's also the case that when people are asked what gives their lives meaning, the overwhelming response is a relationship. A spouse, a partner, children, our friends. In one study, 90% of the people, when asked what gave the number one source of meaning in their life, responded that it was a relationship. So Cynthia, by taking care of her family and her loved ones, was increasing her sense of meaning. She was making a positive difference in the lives of people she loved. But that's not all she did. Cynthia turned to her values, and she decided to invest her money in something she cared deeply about. Throughout her childhood, Cynthia's mom had taken her to museums and to plays and theaters, and she really appreciated what arts had done for her life, how they had enriched her life, how they had broadened her perspectives. And she had become increasingly frustrated by hearing about how all these budget cuts were forcing schools to eliminate arts education. So Cynthia did her research, and she decided to make a substantial contribution to the Geffen Playhouse. And that's a Los Angeles theater that was founded by David Geffen of DreamWorks. So Cynthia became a member of the board of directors, and she created gifted days for Geffen events. So she brings LA students from the very, very toughest neighborhoods to the theater to spend an entire day watching behind the scenes of these live theater productions. Now, I'm sure there are days that one of Cynthia's kids is sick, and she probably has to miss some board meetings. And I'm sure there are days that the logistics of getting busloads of kids to and from the theater doesn't go according to plan, and she might not make it home in time for dinner. I'm sure Cynthia would not tell you she has found balance, but she is thriving. Forget balance, focus on well-being, and you too will thrive. Thank you.
We'd like to thank you very much, Dr. Cabrera. That's very wonderful, and congratulations again.
Thank you.
I'd like to open it up for questions, comments.
It's crystal clear, huh? Yes,
Please.
Have you found that a woman can find meaning in being at home, just at home with her children, not just at home, but being at home with her children?
yes. So the question is, have I found that women can find meaning by being home with their children? And absolutely, absolutely. I mean, meaning is a very personal thing. And so each person has their own sense of what gives their lives meaning, and many women find that alone to be all the meaning they need in life. Yes. Yes.
Do you feel that success being having a set job and set hours kind of puts us down and forces us to try and balance everything, and thus detracts from our well-being instead of kind of enforcing well-being?
I think having set hours at work, I think he asked, is that
Just kind of
forcing us to try to find balance, because it's keeping us from having balance, right? Yes, yes, and I think that's, in fact, it's interesting, when I started this book as an organizational psychologist, and I was doing all this research on women's careers and seeing the frustration in all these women that I spoke to, my first idea for the book was to advocate for workplace change, because that's the biggest problem we have. The workplace is so inflexible that it is hard to meet all of our responsibilities, and that is what is causing so much suffering as far as well-being. And I do think giving more control over when, where, and how we work is exactly what everybody needs, not just women. And I will say women need that because they're trying to struggle so much and balance with so many things, but what the research is showing is that the younger men are as interested in being home with the children and sharing equally in the housework and the caregiving, that they start off saying, we're not going to have the typical breadwinner caregiving family. We're not going to do that. We're going to do something different. The problem is, when they get it into the workplace is so rigid, so inflexible, and so demanding that it's impossible for even the men to spend the time that they would like to spend with their families and at home. So what would happen if the workplace were more flexible, then the men and women would be able to more equally share at home, and everyone would be better off.
Do you think with the younger generation of men wanting to be partaking in childcare and the family, that will eventually change? Because not only, is it for themselves, but also for the women in their lives too. Because I find that, like you said, it's such a male-dominated, and they set the rules. So do you think that eventually with, men kind of going
Yes.
pulling out to the ladder, that they'll make that change?
Right,
That
because
it'll be more equal, rather than, like I said, the wife always goes home with the mother. Why can't it be the guy, the father, ends up being in an emergency room, why can't it be the father? Why is it always gonna have
well, the reason right now that it's not the father is because it turns out that workplaces are starting to become more flexible. They're offering flexible policies. But if you take those and use that flexibility, it can hurt your career. In many workplaces, there are negative career consequences. You're seen as less committed if you do that. And what happens is the consequences are more negative for men because it goes against the stereotype.
That's what I'm saying. I think there needs to be a change in that stereotype,
Yes,
which
there does.
is not considered a
And the hope is that more men who really do want to spend time with their families coming up through the ranks will advocate for more change.
And I think, it balances out there. You have both men and women, equal, so it won't be.
Ideally,
Yeah, it won't be
that's
until
what
that guy
happens.
goes home and it's like, oh, wow, she must
Right.
not like his career. But if the woman doesn't, it's like, she must not like her child. But it's just, you can't be any different.
Yeah, I do hope it will be changing. Yes,
Could you give us a preview of some of the topics you covered in your book?
I just gave you a great review of it. I'm just talking right now about the first chapter, which is complaining about the workplace and how it needs to change. And the rest of the book, it goes into a lot more detail about the model. It's all based around the model of well-being, and it talks about mindfulness and gratitude and hope in much more detail, as well as the living your values, developing your strengths, and finding ways to make a positive impact. That's really what the book is all about. Yes?
Hello, my name is Tariko Parson. I play the faculty at Women Learning Studies. And I like your slogan design, forget balance, focus on well-being. We understand logic, you have to focus, be mindful and grateful and happy, but there is a huge gap between understand, these things, and be. Be mindful, be happy, be grateful. And can you comment on these things to be a person?
Yes, I can say it's always easier to know what you're supposed to do than to do it, right? And that's the books that we read, there's great advice and great ideas, but it is being intentional about making these changes in your life. And I tried very hard with my book to make it very practical and give very concrete suggestions for things that you could do. And each chapter is with what you can do and very concrete things. And I think it's being intentional and really wanting to make change and choosing just a few things at a time to start bringing into your life and trying those out and seeing if they work for you. And if they don't, then picking another one and trying that one out and trying intentionally to start doing it so that it becomes a habit over time.
So it means a reprogram your brain.
Yes, kind of. Yes, or organizing your life to even have reminders to do these things, And so until you reprogram your brain, it's just remembering to do it. And so having ways of coming up with cues, and I talk a little bit about that in the book too, just to remind yourself to start putting these practices into practice in your life. And over time, if you do it enough, it will become more habitual and more automatic.
We have a question.
Yes.
So, I know you mentioned a study or written that because of the rigidity of the workplace, that make it hard for women or to like couples in general to be flexible in household work and taking care of the children. And I have a question on that, is that do you think it's a cultural thing? Is it because of the cultural values you mentioned between femininity and masculinity of the culture, high power this one, low power this one? Is that effective? I know for United States, we score about 47 on masculinity culture, so we are a little bit rigid. And we could say that to Japan and Korea, but in Europe, I think Denmark would be.
Right, it depends on the European country because they're very different, yes. And it is cultural. I mean, and our whole, norms about male being the breadwinner and woman being the caregiver, those are cultural norms that are changing, but have not completely changed. And so a lot of times, and what happens is, especially when we get stressed, when stressors occur, and even this is what's happening in the young families coming through saying, we're going to do things differently, but the stress happens and we tend to just kind of go back the way things were, and it's hard to do things differently. And I think, so that's the cultural norms affecting the division of labor at home, and there are cultural norms that are affecting the workplace, and so that's why change is so slow, because it takes a long time to change cultures. But I think there is a lot of interest in change, and I think it's going to happen. But it's a hard thing to change, so it's slow.
We have time for one more? Yes.
I was listening about a couple weeks ago on a podcast called On Being from National Public Radio, and the person that does the podcast interviewed this woman, Ellen Langer. Have you heard of her? She's
Yes.
a psychologist at Harvard. And it was interesting to listen to her for the whole hour. And she was saying she didn't like the word work-life balance, and she said it's better than imbalance, which is true. But she referred to something called work-life integration.
Yes.
So whatever you are at work, you should feel the same sort of like you're being while you're on vacation, while you're at home with people. And I thought that I had never heard of that in my life.
That I have heard of, and I wholeheartedly agree with. It's about being a whole person, right? And being able to integrate all our different roles in life and our different responsibilities in life. So yes, she's great and does a lot of good work, and I think work-life integration is a much better thing to be seeking than work-life balance.
Thank you very much.